I learn something new every day.
Ooh, nobody told him to be quiet. Okay, he says, shh, what do you need? Are you lost? But we can ask him about the ceiling. So as you can see here, no, but I do have a question about the ceiling. What is that image up there? That's a map of the All. I like to think of them as spirit realms. That's Tyria in the middle. All those other circles are spheres of influence and powerful magic. This idea of spheres of influence, I'm not going to go into that much in this video, but as you play through this plot, you'll get some elaboration on that. And powerful magic. What about the letters? Are those? He says, yeah. First letter of each dragon's name. So we can say, who's S? He says, I don't know any more than that. I like this, by the way, because it kind of shows our character easily reads the New Crichton while we as players have to spend ages translating it all. But he says, I don't know any more than that. That's all they could get from the Tome of the Five True Gods, that placeholder book we were looking at earlier. It's too damaged, he says. Some of these scholars in here would kill to know the full name of that dragon. Oh yeah, don't we know it? Is it the deep sea dragon, we can say? He says, they think so. Me? I think they probably got the letter wrong, but who knows? They're still translating and trying to fill in lost pieces. Wouldn't that be a dick move if they ended up getting it wrong? I don't know. I feel like it's kind of cool that he says that they might get it wrong, but I sort of don't like to entertain the thought that the devs haven't settled on what his name should be. Do you know what I mean? And that they might have potentially put out S for us now, but later they're going to panic and then change it. But here we got an Arcanist.
I'll be out of your way as soon as I finish cataloging this row.
Oh, but... she got told to be quiet. Oh, but that's a shame. I wanted to read all these books we clearly cannot interact with. Alright, fine. So here, again, I'm holding down left control. Very important for this kind of thing. You'll see there's a stuffed exotic bird. We may as well check this out. Funny looking chicken. That's all we get on that one. But if you look behind the bookshelf, you may be surprised to find there's nearly always something to read, but this section just doesn't seem to have anything. When I was originally playing this, I spent far too long. I was already buzzing from reading all this stuff, and then I spent far too long trying to climb up these crates here. It was not a good idea. I was trying to get up. Ultimately, it won't do anything for you though, so don't worry. Take that from me. We won't go inside there just yet. Let's move around a bit more. Now we come to a big section with 2 floors. So let's come up here. The carpet here is actually, as you can see, a map of Tyria, which is really, really cool. But as we move around, you will notice actually upstairs in the Dermot Priory as well, they use a map on the floor every now and then. But as we move around, you'll see that there are various books we can look at. So we'll go top, work our way around, and then we'll go underneath and work our way around. Starting off with the Ascalon Census. I have some cool trivia for you guys about this one. This isn't really, we can't read very much about it. It says, this historical document is a record of the inhabitants of Ascalon prior to the searing that destroyed their culture and killed so many. Now what's really cool that the devs did here was back in the early days, way long time ago, with the first game you would play in an area called pre-searing, and then you would get to a certain point in the main story and 2 years would pass, it would jump forward in time, and then Ascalon would be destroyed by the searing. And what they did in the original game was, when you were playing pre-searing, you could meet loads of NPCs, different farmers and stuff, whatever, right? And after the searing, you could meet many of those NPCs and see what they were doing now, whether they'd become soldiers, whether they'd lost their homes, whatever, right? And most NPCs that you met pre-searing would end up somewhere post-searing. But sometimes you wouldn't meet those characters, and in theory those were then dead characters. So a really early community-like initiative. I think it was just a couple of people that are doing this. But they wrote this thing called the Ascalon Census, where they were tracking the new locations of as many of the pre-searing NPCs as possible. So sort of as a census to say, hey, here's who's alive, here's who's not. And now we fast forward today, in Guild Wars 2, they've actually got an Ascalon Census here in the library as a bit of a nod back to that. Really kind of cool. He's a bit of trivia to miss, but if you've been in the community long enough, then you'll pick up on weird things like that, you know? I mean, really, if I'm honest, that might even be before my time. I certainly wasn't very active in the community, even if I was playing the game at that point. So here's the quotations of Ben Millen. Ben is, not as far as I'm aware, a character you can meet in Guild Wars 2 or in Guild Wars 1, but he is referenced in Guild Wars 2 in a book in Divinity's Reach. Apparently there's a book called The Poems of Ben Millen or something, and that's pretty much it. Now, I may be wrong, but that's what I know about him anyway. The quotations of him, though. This book is a first printing and compiles the works of Crichton philosopher Ben Millen, so he's a philosopher from Crichton. All humans contain vast amounts of hate, he says. The key is to release that evil in prayer to Grenth. If magic and power are too strong, quell them with monotony and routine. When you see yourself do good, praise the gods. When you see yourself do evil, mourn their absence. Just a nice little insight there. No lore bombs or anything, but a nice insight into the minds of the Crichtons and godly worship and stuff. Maybe not accurate for today, but, you know, years ago, certainly.
Breathe deeply. The air is rich with history.
Oh.
And hot air.
I was going to say, you're so right, it's rich with history. Jeez, it's so good. Man, if this place was real, you know what I wonder? How many of these books could the devs in theory, or the writers in theory, actually realistically fill with cool stories? You know, if they had all the time in the world, how much depth is there to this universe and this world? Here we've got another book, pretty easy to miss. Stormcaller, Calling the Storm. You'll notice, well, I guess 2 of these have been about Ascalon anyway. It sort of feels like sometimes the books are arranged by subject material, but then there's like one oddball that always throws it off. Anyway, this book is by Watchman Pramus, is the definitive tome on the history of the ancient relic used in the war against the Char. Watchman Pramus is one of the NPCs in the first game you would meet to do like a bonus objective. So the structure of like personal story quests back then were missions that you could easily fail, like they were actually kind of difficult. And they all also had a bonus objective you could go for, some hard challenge. And in one of the earliest missions in the game you would meet Watchman Pramus, and here's a tome that he apparently wrote. So, King Doric constructed Stormcaller on Horn Hill north of Rin, his capital city, in the year 0 AE. Stormcaller we used in the previous game to fight back against the Flame Legion Char, which just in general were the Char back then. The Flame Legion were using great pyres, to empower their armies through the use of Flame Legion magic. And we used Stormcaller to summon a great rain that put all of the fires out, ultimately, okay? And this weakened the Char and allowed us to retake Rin, although it had already been destroyed. This guy tells us that Stormcaller, which we used 250 years ago, was actually made in the year 0. So many years ago. We're talking 1,000 years ago. It was created by King Doric. King Doric, the same king who made a trek to Ara to plead to the gods to take magic back. This is the same king. The greatest king that has ever existed for mankind, I guess you could say. Read more. The horn had originally been built to demonstrate the king's mastery of the arcane arts, but it became a weapon shortly after. Interesting that he's really good at the arcane arts here. You might notice a subtle little irony or testament to his character, okay? The gods gave everyone magic. He got really good at using magic. This was to demonstrate his mastery of the arcane arts, and yet still he appreciated the necessity to take magic away from humans. You know, that shows character, and it's very subtly done. But it became a weapon shortly after. As the Great Northern Wall was being built, it became known via prophecy that the sounds of the blowing pipes would render the enemies of Ascalon helpless. Not necessarily just the Char at this point. The horn's mouthpiece had been lost in the Guild War, but it was recovered by Prince Rurik, who then used the horn to summon rain and weaken the Char by putting out their fires. That's where we came in the previous game. So, we'll leave the book. These are the 3 on this little section, okay? Moving on. Doesn't look like we've got any just here. But I'm holding left control to highlight all the books so we don't miss any, and that's also my push to talk. So the second I start holding it, I start feeling like I'm in like TeamSpeak or something and holding it for you guys way more than is necessary. Okay, shh, we gotta keep it down. Don't talk about unnecessary things. We're in a library, a place of learning. Okay, myths and legends of ancient Ascalon. This tells ancient Char legends about Ascalon. It was a mythology book compiled by Sita Commandheart. Now, this is an NPC you can meet in Guild Wars 2. This is not like an obscure Guild Wars 1 reference. She's actually at the ruins of Rin in this game. She's one of the NPCs you can speak to that gives you like a little speed boost as you're running around, and she's the foreman of the Priory members who are there digging out there. So don't forget, there's a lot of references to Priory members here too. Many people who are a part of the Dermot Priory have written books of their own, and she is our first example of that, but you see that quite a lot. So we'll flip the page. What do the Char say about all this? We just read a human version of it. Once, fearsome beasts walked the land. These giants ripped smaller animals apart with their sharp teeth and kicked rocks miles away. The creatures had claws longer than Char arms that they used to spear and cook their prey. These creatures died because they did not work in warbands. When dragons attacked, they fought and died alone. This is potentially a race we've never heard about before. One of the ones that went extinct. It's funny because we hear about everyone going extinct in the last Elder Dragons Rising, but all we really have are examples of many races that actually survived. The Seers survived in some capacity, survived enough to go to war later with the Massar. The Massar both survived and won a later war. The Forgotten were all over the place in the last game. The only people who really had a massive setback were the Gw2, but they're still all around. So this is one of our first examples of something that actually did go extinct. Similar to the Giganticus lupicus, of course. Flip the page. The Char ruled Ascalon differently. We made warbands and legions. We made armies. Then the humans arrived and pushed us from our land. We retaliated and took it back. Very curt. I really like how some of these books you can just tell that the whole writing style is different just based on the NPC that supposedly wrote it. This area of the library is just filled with rolls of paper. Cool little bit of attention to detail actually that I hadn't thought about. Maybe this is because I don't spend enough time in the libraries IRL. But, this is obviously, they're going to need a lot of paper and a lot of stuff to organise all these books, all these tomes, all these scrolls. And so there's huge sections dedicated to that. Here we got a nice little picture, a section here that doesn't seem to have anything. I feel so good being here. It's unbelievable. I had no idea this patch would have something so cool, but here we are. And then once again on the opposite side we have a bunch more scrolls. Alright, here we got a historian we can talk to, and a book called The Six, Being or Playing God. So this is more an editorial than actual historical work. This book by Gad deconstructs the nature of the gods worshipped by humans. Gad was one of the first Asura we ever met in the previous game. Again, a very prominent hero, an Asura named Vek. Gad was actually Vek's father. And ultimately, spoilers for Guild Wars 1, Gad eventually died. Gad worked with a human named Livia, who you may be more than familiar with, is still a huge part of the plot in theory. And I think this guy's voice actor was the same as Brain from Pinky and the Brain. I can't quite remember. Alright, read on. Is it a coincidence that they have been gone since the first dragon began to stir? I think not. While they may not be gods, they are certainly not fools. The dragons would covet magic such as theirs. These beings are benefactors, often reluctant, sometimes misguided, and occasionally vindictive. To say that they created our world is ridiculous. Did they bring humans to Tyria? I cannot argue against this. It is an ancient belief that has no proof to support or deny it. Perhaps humans are constructs created from clay and bone. It's very interesting to me that they flat out in-game talk about this. This whole humans came to Tyria from an alien world has always been one of those weird bits of lore that isn't so much in the games as it is in interviews from the devs and stuff. And so that's always thrown like discredit over it whenever, like certainly whenever I've mentioned it on my channel. People have been like, well, where's the proof that this is actually true? I like that they put it in the game here. Now, they're not confirming that is true here. Well, Gad, at least, had no idea whether it was true or not. But they do show that it is something, a part of this world. The debate is a part of this world, and that's what's important. Perhaps humans are constructs created from clay and bone. Very interesting thing for a necromantic golomancer to say. Perhaps they were brought here from somewhere else in the mists, or some other realm within the eternal alchemy. Crazy notion here that other places in the mists, to Gad, aren't necessarily other realms within the eternal alchemy. I have always been trying to pair them up, think of them one as the same, but here he considers them to be different. This is just another thing where they're slowly wrapping these things in that make it seem like an enigma to poke too much at how their universe works. I think either of these is plausible given the power wielded by these beings. But are they gods? I say no. They are what we would all become if given the amount of magical energy they possess and allowed to live as long as they appear to have. Not a new one for the franchise, but cool to see them poke at it just a little bit more here. Okay, the six. Let's move on. Hello, Mr. Historian. What are you reading?
Did the archivist send you to check on me? Tell her I'm being careful. Won't happen again.
Whoa, what did you do? Are you in trouble? And just bellow it out throughout the library. Oh, dude. See, that was a cool little line as well. You'd expect to just get some nonsense minor line about, the books or similar to what we've had before. But no, this guy's done something wrong before. No, the archivist did not send me. Alright, what else have we got? We didn't miss any books there. Was there really only the Six Bane God? Okay. There'll be another hidden book here which is related to the story, which we won't be reading on this video. You guys will play the patch and I'll talk about it in a video later this week.
The numbering system here is surprisingly complex.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Absolutely. Not really too much interesting with her. And no books up here as well. I thought there were much more on the top row. That's fine though. Okay, so we'll come down and we'll check the next row. Did we talk to you?
Every interruption is a thought lost.
Sorry, jeez, that person didn't really like us very much. Okay, that's fine though. Alright, so we'll go left to right again, I guess. Actually, let's go right to left, sure. So, no books around here. Some of them are hidden quite high up as well, like quite high on the shelves. You may have to jump on crates to be able to get access to them. So do consider that. Very realistic for a library, in my opinion. Here's one. This is Vexed Thesis. So this is the son of that guy Gad that we were just reading about. An Asura named Vec postulates in this antique scholarly thesis that if an Elder Dragon were to die, its magic would be released back into Tyria, starting at the moment of death. I mean, this is cutting-edge theory right here that we're only just beginning to learn about and accept. And here we've got Vec 250 years ago who wrote about basically the same thing. He further suggests, however, that this will allow the remaining dragons to become even more powerful as they begin consuming the released magic as well. So the more we kill, the harder they get. Seems like kind of an obvious direction for the franchise to go, but I mean, it makes sense. It's a good reason for it, right? And I reckon my prediction is future storylines will talk about this quite a lot, and this is how they can keep one-upping themselves and saying, oh, the next dragon is the worst one yet, you know? But yeah, so we'll put that back. Also kind of ties into what we heard about the All earlier and how if you kill one, everything tips off into the void. Long stack of books there, nothing up there. This guy doesn't actually have dialogue for us, interestingly enough, but there is a book next to him called The Crew Influencers. This collection of tips and tricks will guide the reader through crew selection, written by Florgy. Florgy was an Asura in the first game who was like one of these completely random NPCs, akin to like the Asura we just talked to upstairs who said, oh, I didn't do anything wrong, sorry. You know, like a really, really minor NPC. But she was stood with a couple of other Asura, and basically she was just a bit of a bitch, talking about how this male Asura had a crush on her. I'll read you her exact dialogue, okay? So she was a female Asura, she was in some weird love triangle thing, right? And her dialogue to us was, Oggy, in reference to one of these other male Asura near her, is such a weirdo. He hits on any two-legged creature wearing a skirt but has no clue how to talk to a lady. We have a word for boys like that where I come from. It's loser. That's all she had to say. But here we have tips and tricks from her about crew influences. So she says, not all tasks can be performed by crew members. You may need special volunteers to further your research. So this was just as the Asura came to the surface and began interacting with humans. For example, suppose your crew has a prototype that will allow an Asura to fly at the speed of a Canthan firework. How are you going to test it? Obviously, you can't test it. You're far too valuable, and crew members can be expensive to replace. So, you need a booker. Your average booker, human, is very easy to manipulate with flattery and tends to enjoy going on adventures. I love this line, it's so plainly put. Easy to manipulate with flattery, tends to enjoy going on adventures. There you go. So strap him to a Canthan firework and off he goes. Brilliant. No more books around here? The density of books is disappointing me. It probably shouldn't, but it does. Okay, and a bunch more scrolls here. Oh, the books at the very end of this room are phenomenal. I'm going to wait a second to read those. Oh, they're so good, guys. All right, so we're going to come back down here now, and we're going to read about this stuff. So we got the politics of Kryta here. So this says, in a missive to Niam of the Grove, Firstborn Dagonet describes the court politics of the Krytan royalty. So there are multiple Firstborn, of course. Some of them we're incredibly familiar with: Fowlane, Kaith, Traherne, and so on. There are also some less known Firstborn. Dagonet is one of them. It's always been an NPC. Dagonet is there in Divinity's Reach. He's up in the gardens near the Asura Gate, just standing around with generic NPC dialogue. Never really had much going on. But here's a book from Firstborn Dagonet to Niam. Niam is from the cycle of the Noon, I think it's the Noon, and the leader of the Wardens, okay, back in the Grove. So Niam's been kind of important. Dagonet's never had much going on, but this is Dagonet talking to Niam about human politics. Dearest Niam, I write to you from the beautiful gardens of Divinity's Reach. One day you really must visit. You would be amazed by the political maneuverings I witness here. The kingdom has two ruling bodies, the Queen and the Ministry. Although the Queen is technically in charge, the Ministry goes to great lengths to get what they want, and they're often successful. The Ministry is led by a bombastic human named Legate Minister Lord Cordicus Beetlestone the Wise. I kid you not, and if you think his name is dazzling, you should meet him. He's quite the charmer. But he's no Queen Jenna, and try as he might, the people will not love him as they love her. She is the ruler of a diminished society of humans, the combination of Kryta and Ascalon. I am ever impressed at her ability to pull her people together to defend each other, their territory, and their beliefs. Humans have many flaws, but their nobility is sometimes as sincere as ours. So yeah, the Silvari is supposed to be very noble as well. They constantly talk about this, and it's something I feel like I have to be reminded about, to be honest. But this is a cool little idea, you know, it's just a young, naive Silvari's look at the ridiculousness that Crichton politics has become. Over here we've got something called Unending Autumn. This is a poem by Arcanist Davworth that details the time just after the searing of Ascalon. Davworth you can actually meet out in the Iron Marches. He's the guy that stood next to the searing cauldron, trying to keep people away. There's a couple of events to do with it. Yeah, he's there in Guild Wars 2. He says, the summer of 1070 AE was particularly hot in Ascalon. Fire rained from the sky. Thousands died. A line like this, back when I was writing the lore series for the Ascalon stuff, I feel like this kind of line, the summer of 1070 AE was particularly hot in Ascalon. Boom! Sounds like a great opening line. Alright, read on. Autumn was worse, because it hadn't ended and Ascalon shriveled. Still, some trees are dead wood rather than leafy beacons of hope. Winter will never come to soothe tensions. Very short, kind of curt, I don't know. The information there is interestingly written, I'll put it that way. Don't have too much more to glean from it. This one's really kind of cool. This is called In Consideration of Sacrifice. Bit of a dark book. Some of the darker areas that Guild Wars 2's gone, at least, and it's pretty tame at that. But In Consideration of Sacrifice by Evinia of the Shining Blade. Evinia was a huge member of the story. She went missing randomly in Guild Wars 1 as they were setting up plots for Guild Wars 2, and they've not returned to her just yet. But it's nice to see a book from her. As with many things, it shows that they remember her. Read on. A human lay upon the sacrificial altar. White mantle braziers cast a demonic glow. Masat. They didn't touch the ground, but floated above it, as if too good for our land. So this immediately should be apparent to you guys. This is a story about how the White Mantle and the Masat were sacrificing humans with a lot of magic within them to further their own agenda, I'll put it that way. And Evinia was a Shining Blade member who saw this happening. She realized that the White Mantle were evil. Still, just recruits. My fellows and I had rushed into the depths of the Maguma jungle to make a difference. I watched the Masat drift toward the terrified captive. Our orders were to wait. They circled their victim and his fearful cries rang out. I saw it then, the scepter of awe, raised high, glinting in the moonlight. We have to go now. I looked to our lieutenant. Why do we wait? Read on. It's kind of cool to see about the scepter of awe too. Our lieutenant cast a warning glare at us. They were going to kill their prisoner, and we were waiting. I didn't understand. The man screamed, a sound so full of pain I thought I was hearing his soul being torn from his body. I gripped my weapon tightly to keep from screaming with him. It was done. The man was dead. A wave of euphoria came over the White Mantle and their grotesque gods. They fell into chaos and let slip their vigilance. My lieutenant raised his weapon and said, to know when to sacrifice one for the many is never easy, but today, the Shining Blade will gleam with the blood of murderers. Charge! And then it ends. Really cool story. A bit of a longer one. But that's what I'm talking about. These are the kind of stories I like. More insights into old stories we knew about. Okay, so moving on. As I said, it's kind of dark, you know, just leaving someone to wait and die. You don't see that so much. So we get 3 books here. They're actually on the other side, actually, aren't they? So never mind. They're the only 3 in this section? Oh, I guess so. Oh, really? They're the only 3? What? That's insane to me. How are they the only 3? Myths and Legends of Ancient Ascalon. Did we read that? What was the Myths and Legends? I guess we did. Okay. So the Human Rise of Rin. Rin, once again, so we're back on Ascalon's story. This is part 1 of a 3-part volume by Array Lorehunter about the history of Ascalon's capital. Again, this is another character in the ruins of Rin, just as we had another member of the Prio who was writing about it before. This person in particular is wondering how true the stories of Stormcaller really are. The events we witnessed as a player in the first game where Rurik summoned the rains and enabled us to kill many of the Char that were inhabiting Rin, he questions this, right? He questions how strong really could Stormcaller have been. And here's a book, The Human Rise of Rin, part 1. Rin is the sister city to Draskir. Draskir was the seat of government and business, while Rin represented art, magic, and learning. This is fairly new, this distinction between the 2 cities. This was some of the stuff I loved about the old Guild Wars 1 stories, how much depth they went into, you know, the various cities that had existed in Ascalon and been destroyed before he even became a player. You look at Guild Wars 2's Kryta in comparison, right? And it's like, oh yeah, we've got 1 city, a couple of villages, and the only history really associated with any of them tends to be based off of Guild Wars 1's, you know? It's not the same as having Dreskir that was the capital and then it got destroyed and they decided to go back to Rin and make that the capital because it was south of the wall. Like, there was so much more. Alright, anyway, moving on. King Doric founded Rin for the study of arcane arts, and in order to create a powerful defensive force with mages of immense power. Again, so this is another like slight twist on the Doric story. So magic was given to the humans of Tyria, and all this war broke out and stuff, and that he hated it. When was he doing this, though? He was deliberately trying to create forces of mages with all this power? Maybe this ultimately backfired on him, and that's when he went on his trek to Ara. Who knows? But don't forget as well, Stormcaller was forged here for Rin. It all ties into this idea of displays of magic, right? Magic affecting those early human cultures. Dreskir was weakened in the Guild Wars and finally fell when the Char attacked. The terrified king moved his capital to still strong Rin. Hold on, that seems to have skipped forward there. Give me a second. Did I accidentally skip one? No, I guess I didn't. So then we've jumped forward very long way after King Doric there, and now basically he's talking about how Dreskir had been built north of the wall because the Char hadn't attacked for so long. The humans basically got a bit too ballsy, and then the Guild Wars happened. It got very weakened. Then the Char attacked. It got destroyed completely. They moved the capital to Rin, and then that's the start of Guild Wars 1, really, when Rin is the capital. Alright, so the first one was called The Human Rise of Rin. This one's called The Human Fall of Rin, Part 2. Part 2 of the 3-part volume. Humans lost most of what made Rin special during the Searing when Flame Shamans destroyed Ascalon. Interesting that this guy separates himself from the Flame Legion, even though the Char were pretty much united under their banner at that time. King Adalbern moved out of Rin but kept it as his capital throughout his life. The Sorcerer King loved Rin. Interesting to hear him called a Sorcerer King. We never really knew him as a Sorcerer King. Yeah, he had a magical sword and ultimately unleashed the Foe Fire, but I guess that's how the Char view him. The Char hate magic now, right? And so he would be one of their most hated enemies, so it kind of makes sense that they inflict this idea that he was very magical. Keep reading. Adalbern's son used Stormcaller to cripple the Char, but eventually Bonfaz Burntfur and his warband overran the city of Rin. And then later we, the player, came along and we killed Bonfaz Burntfur there. He was kind of one of these early game bosses that kept coming up in many missions, and then ultimately you managed to kill at the end. But by that time it was too late and Rin had fallen. And now the third part is called The Char Rise of Rin. Char builders replaced the crumbling stones of the human capital with strong iron and renamed it the Black Citadel. Some of the pitiable stone architecture can still be seen south of the Bane in the Black Citadel. The Imperator has left the ruins there as a reminder to all. Char society has flourished and taken root in the land that once was called Ascalon. We have returned home. So cool, the Imperator, the same dude we were fighting side by side with in the previous patch. I love those moments where everything just sort of comes together. Alright, so that's pretty much that. Now let's have a look at some of these really cool books at the far end of this corridor. And we're done with this large section. Let's go with quotes from Ventari the Centaur first, shall we? A first edition of the collected quotes of Ventari, the centaur beloved by many Silvari. So Ventari in the first game was a centaur who turned his back on war, eventually nurtured the Grove. This is the story of the Silvari. I'm assuming you guys already know this one. And these are quotes from him. There was a time once when humans and centaurs lived in peace, but that time was long, long ago. I'm afraid I will not live to see such a time come again to Tyria. Now, one thing I didn't confirm for you guys, but it feels very reminiscent. I'm wondering if these are direct pulls of dialogue from the first game. This feels here a lot like dialogue if I'd spoken to him in Ventari's Refuge in the first game. I don't know. The next line is, the outside world is a violent place where the seeds of chaos are sown with innocent tears. Centaurs are a proud race, fiery with passion. They would not see humans as equals. Against the odds they fought. The humans rose to crush them. War consumed those lands, and my home with it. Forging the path of serenity from the mind to the heart is more difficult than any battle fought with steel. Now we get into more quotes that influence the Silvari. The only peace to be found is within the self. This place is home. As bloodshed cast its shadow, we shelter beneath this place of solace, to live life as it was meant to be, in harmony and unity, regardless of race or caste. All are welcome. So now we can put it back because you might start recognizing these are the scriptures from the tablet. All of this began as a seed that Ronan gave me. He fought the White Mantle who slaughtered my people. Those battles cost him his wife and daughter. In his grief, he threw down his weapon. Perhaps he, Ronan, was looking for escape or a place to die, to end his suffering. There he would lay a broken man, and in that moment he found the seed that would become all of this. Live life well and fully, and waste nothing. Do not fear difficulty. Hard ground makes stronger roots. The only lasting peace is the peace within your own soul. All things have a right to grow. The blossom is brother to the weed. Never leave a wrong to ripen into evil or sorrow. Act with wisdom, but act. From the smallest blade of grass to the largest mountain, where life goes, so too should you. I almost feel like if I were to make a new Sylvari, I'd probably pick this last quote just because it appears at the end. Where life goes is one of the best stories as well, right? About Malik. Ooh, well, let's read this book over here. The Nightmare Harbinger. Okay.